everything that we've already done to stay well, I'm asking everybody in the town to please understand that this may only be the start.
The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the business community has been significant.
I can't express how proud I am of our employees during this difficult time.
Selectman Priest will be monitoring comments on Facebook Live and WebEx chat.
Online and through virtual meetings, the town has been continuing on and really not missing a beat with a lot of the activities that help businesses kind of move along.
We've really been able to keep on rolling, both shelter in place with all the board as well as staff.
We're looking forward to having you. It sounds like it'll be a very nice addition.
One of the things that has really impressed me over the last few months in the town of Burlington is how proactive and creative they have been in their ability to carry on government in an efficient and effective manner.
This is an issue that's been growing.
Burlington's prior investment in digital infrastructure and communication positioned the town to quickly and effectively pivot to a web-based virtual operation.
So the next item on the agenda is...
Throughout the pandemic, we've had employees here faithfully providing essential services to our businesses and our residents on a daily basis.
Whether it's trash, public safety, or in terms of businesses, some of the licensing and construction permitting has still continued on.
The Chamber worked together with the restaurants and municipal officials to expedite the permitting process,
so that restaurants can apply for a permit to us quickly.
We've adopted an extremely extensive public noticing and web conferencing.
This continued operation gives Burlington residents and businesses an edge during the pandemic and will position the town for a stronger and more rapid economic recovery.
You're really quick with numbers, John.
Of all the communities that I practice in, I would have to say Burlington was the most sophisticated, the most responsive, and the most seamless in terms of being able to carry on business.
I've received a tremendous amount of positive feedback from residents and businesses.
The Chamber faces these challenges head-on and continues to work with the business community as we move forward to the new normal.
We are still out there working and helping Burlington and Burlington businesses get through this.
We look forward to a strong and healthy future ahead.
And I'm really proud to say that Burlington didn't miss a beat.
Okay, that'll do it.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. The video you saw at the top of the show is reflective of what we're going to be discussing this month, a community coming together in the face of a pandemic and working together to get through the difficult times. We're going to take this show in 4 parts. Up first will be my interview with Planning Director Kristin Kassner, followed by a talk with Economic Development Director Melisa Tintocalis, a discussion with Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker, and for an inside view from the Gutierrez company, and a talk with Scott Weiss. Let's get started.
Well, I'm now joined by Planning Department Head Kristin Kassner. Kristin, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So I just wanted to start off kind of broadly. So when, the order came from the governor that, all non-essential businesses had to close and, town halls closed, what was kind of like the main role of the planning department at that time?
Well, when the order came down, we quickly said, okay, well, what can we continue to do? There was definitely a major question that very first planning board meeting that I think was a day or two after the order. We did end up canceling that meeting I think everybody canceled anything that week. And then started to regroup with the town IT and figuring out the WebEx platform, which we're using, as well as a whole week of training on how to use that platform. With our board members and our staff, just to make sure that we understood how to use it. My husband jokes because everyone was stay at home, and he said, "You spent an entire week saying hello. Can you hear me? Do you know where your mute button is?" But that's what you had to do, and just get people up to speed. And then you guys were a huge help in terms of just coordinating the the meetings on TV. So, those that were having trouble with the remote platform could call in, watch it on TV. I mean, there's a couple second delay, but that really worked out. That's working out really well. And then working with Amy and others in terms of how do we, notice publicly and get all our information out to people. So it was a lot of mailings, a lot of training quickly to get people up to speed, and coordination among all of us. And I think that one of the really great things is it showed how well we can work together quickly and kind of non-traditional platforms, and how important those are. And it's really great that we have our meetings televised, but really how critical it is to have them televised and working with technology together and calling in. And so that was just kind of how do we continue to have public meetings. And that was a huge thing. There's a lot of cities and towns that just stopped having public meetings. And admittedly, you really have to pull a lot of things together in terms of trying to get all the information out, getting everything on our website, which we've traditionally done, but more important to do now, re-noticing everything, giving people the information for all the remote meetings. And then on the permitting side of it, we went to Viewpoint last October. So we have online permitting that if we hadn't done that, we would have not been able to do what we did. And we essentially never closed. Things slow down a little bit in terms of a learning curve, but I think Burlington has done a great job of coming together, especially with the development departments, and quickly adapting to the new remote platform, having applicants come to our development coordination meetings, which we had every other Tuesday with applicants and town development departments to kind of come together to talk about what was going on in permitting as well as construction. Now through this time, we've had them weekly, and that's been great. And the development teams have come in and joined us on this platform to have conversations. So I overall, I think actually we do our job better now combined with a lot of this technology that I think we should have been using all along to be inclusive. But it's been a challenge, but I think one that we should take on and should have taken on even before this to make sure we could be more accessible to people in different formats.
Yeah, I didn't even think about, this sort of the serendipity of having the remote permitting kind of go online just somewhat recently, and then, right before all this kind of came down. So that seems like a nice coincidence to have happen.
Oh, I mean, it was a long time in the making, and Amy Warfield spearheaded a couple of years ago with town meeting, and getting all of these departments online, building, planning, Board of Appeals, and some other departments are getting online between engineering, Concom, and Board of Health. So it's been great, and allowed us to keep working. And we're a department. I mean, other than if we're open to the public, we're a department that essentially can function remotely very well. So that's been very good. We used to have team meetings every morning. Now we just have team meetings remotely every morning. So that's worked out great.
Excellent. And as far as projects that were kind of in the pipeline, how were they impacted?
Construction slowed down quite a bit. We had a lot of construction in essential services. So there was actually a good amount still going on. The Burlington Mall interior project stopped, which for a while, which I think has slowed down their project. But actually the Burlington Mall sidewalk project continued on, which was it was a good project to do with that can reduce traffic on all of the roads. To do a lot of these parking lot and road work projects have been able to do them a lot easier than I think they would have had we been fully up and running. So as much as this has been a true tragedy everywhere, there's some opportunity that I think we've been able to, for certain things, to either learn different things, do projects that are normally kind of hard to do. I don't know, just trying to figure out the things that we can do better, or should we prepare for in a different way.
And have you noticed, obviously Burlington usually has a lot of new projects coming in on, all the time. Obviously a lot of restaurants and things like that. Have you noticed a slowdown in the number of like new, applications?
No, not really.
Really? Good.
I know it's surprising. We permitted a restaurant. We permitted Parm at the mall 2 meetings ago. Last meeting we opened Common Craft, which is a one restaurant with multi-platforms of smaller local breweries, distillers, cheesemakers, but just really bringing the local economy into a state. So I think people are just really hopeful that we are at a point where we're up and running. I mean, this week the restaurants are opening inside, differently, but inside. So, and permitting is usually, you're going through the planning board a year and a half before you expect to be even open. So I think when you're still looking at that horizon, I think we're all very wishful that a year and a half from now we'll be in some place back to whatever the new normal is, that we can all get back together again. Yeah. We are seeing a lot of, we do have a lot of subdivisions coming in lately. Small, I mean, Burlington's primarily, for the most part, the easy projects are built out. So they're interesting and challenging in their own ways. But what the building department was seeing was a lot of the bigger commercial projects slowing down, but the small residential home development and renovation projects still, steaming right along.
Okay, so people are still taking care of what they want to get done in the residential properties. And
right. Well, and there's all the home DIYers that are finding a lot of projects to do lately.
Well, that makes sense. Since we're all going to be spending a lot more time at home, I'm sure people are looking to put in pools and decks and all that. And as far as obviously, like you said, everything had to change. Has it been more of a challenge to sort of have interdepartmental communication within town, or has everybody been pretty good about, staying up on the WebEx and other, online platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the development departments that we deal with have been quick to jump on. Some people still call in, which is fine. So no, actually we've been doing pretty well. I mean, there's certain departments we just don't work with all the time, but the development departments that we do, I think everyone's really been quick to figure out how to communicate in this format. I think the biggest challenge is that we're just not used to it, and that you don't have the water cooler chit chat and the passing in the hallway and the finding out information. So you almost have to intentionally ask questions, which I think people are getting better at, rather than just casual conversation to find out information. And I don't know, at least for me, I would rather stand up in front of town meeting or 100 people than be on a WebEx talking to a whole bunch of people. I'm just so used to kind of reading the room and trying to figure out how to navigate conversations, which I think is different in this format versus other things. So, but no, I think town departments have done, at least the ones that we deal with a lot, have done a great job getting up to speed and continuing conversation. I mean, it's weird being in the office and having a WebEx with the person in the office next to you, but it is what it is.
No, I definitely agree with you there. I am very much looking forward to having people back in the studio to interview them, rather than, with my little den behind me at home. And so just, I guess in general, it seems like, things have been kind of moving along pretty well. What do you think, moving forward is sort of like, the next steps that, to get sort of back to normal that will be taking place?
I don't know if anyone knows the answer to that question, but
I figured I would try to speak on you. Maybe you'd have the answer.
Yeah, no, I don't know. But I think what this has brought up, and what I think one of the good things, I think this whole experience, you see a lot of, people show a lot of their true colors, but I think everything's different. And when there's change, whether it's on purpose, forced upon you, so there is change. There's change happening, and none of us know exactly what's on the other side of it. So I think one of the things that we've been talking a lot about of kind of, well, if we don't know, how do we start the conversation to what we think, what we want? Like, what do we want to make this into? How do we, if we're not going to have all these restaurants, what are those spaces? What's, if people don't all come back to work in office buildings, what are those spaces? What are we using those for? How are people going to come back? And it's been interesting because it's really spurred a conversation among property owners and planning board members and town departments. And, Melisa and I have been talking about it of kind of like, how do we become not necessarily flexible enough, but open enough to figure out how to be ready for whatever this next thing is. And it's been interesting dealing with the temporary openings in restaurants. And obviously we want to be super supportive of restaurants opening, but it's, is it safe? Are people able to navigate around the parking lot? If you put a whole bunch of chairs in a parking lot, is that okay? But it's, I think a lot of us have kind of traditional ways of doing things, and we have rules and regulations, and that's the way they are. And I don't know. We're shaking up right now and just trying to figure out, like, what is the appropriate role for us in, helping everybody else get back on their feet and making sure Burlington's back on its feet the way that we want to see it move forward. So, so I don't know. It's just kind of, it's opened up a lot of channels of conversation of really people being open to different options, I guess. And I just always think that's a nice place to be in this terrible thing that's happened, a nice thing that people's minds are open for, to make sure we get back to a place.
Yeah.
That's good for everybody.
Everybody has to definitely be flexible. And on that, during this whole thing, I don't know how much field work, is required from your department, but were there different methods that you had to use, or just different ways of, site visits and sort of things like that?
Well, we don't do a lot of interior inspections. Most of our inspections are all, outdoors, like at the parking lot, striping, landscaping. So, in the past, we might have 4 or 5 people walking around with us. Now it was, maybe 1, or just we visited a site, on our own. Or in some circumstances, just had someone take pictures of certain things if there were specific things that we're looking for and send them to us. So that piece of it wasn't impacted that much. In terms of the occupancy sign off, that was a process, just because we're all supposed to sign a single card, and nobody could get, nobody was in the building or the building department was in the building, but the rest of us remotely, and just trying to figure out that process. But again, the department's adapted, and we had kind of a remote process to finally get the building department to get the okay from all of us and sign off. But it's funny that I think one of the most difficult things was literally sending in an application fee and a check of just, okay, how do we receive the check? How do we receive a plan? How do we stamp a plan? Like, if we're not there. And then in the early part, it was segregating things for 2 days before they, mail if it came in. So anyway, we figured it out, but it was funny that the really simple things were actually the hurdles early on.
Yeah, we had a lot of the same sort of issues too. I mean, and just to conclude, overall, it seems like, everybody kind of worked hard to adapt and sort of, fit the situation as it kind of came about.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we've learned a lot of things throughout this. And I think, look at town meeting. Amy did a fantastic job with town meeting. And then all the pre-questions and the information that was distributed before town meeting. That model should live on for every town meeting. It was amazing. And to have town meeting outside actually was pretty cool.
I enjoyed it.
I don't know. I feel like I hadn't seen anybody for so long that it was just nice to, social distance outside. If that was, but anyway, just a point of, I think that we've learned a bunch of things that I think we should carry on to make just everything better with how we do our jobs.
Yeah, I for one am a fan of town meeting on the field. Well, I appreciate you taking some time and chatting today, and hopefully we'll have you back on soon when the reopening is even more in swing and we can kind of take a better look at it.
And now for more on how Burlington as a town government responded to the pandemic, we go to my interview with Economic Development Director Melisa Tintocalis. Let's check it out.
I'm now joined by Melisa Tintocalis, the Economic Development Director, somewhat new in town, but I'm sure has been getting a lot of experience with all this craziness going on. Melisa, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
So just wanted to start in general, like when, everything started to happen in March and the governor issued the closing of non-essential businesses, sort of what was the response in your department? Like what did you have to do initially?
I think, the Economic Development Office in general started to play a key role in communication from the state to kind of the local level, and then to the businesses, and just connecting, folks to the information. We have, the Chamber of Commerce and Rick Parker had been great, but it is also membership driven. So there's a lot of people who, you still need to communicate and get the word out, whether it was closures or then as time evolved and the CARES Act came in to play, it was about access to resources and support financially.
And just the sort of day-to-day, was it difficult to kind of keep in communication with people that you couldn't see in person anymore?
Yeah, I think that was a big challenge. And I heard from a lot of different communities. It revealed a little bit of kind of the shortcomings in the databases that communities had with their businesses. I think there's strong communication with our residents through Code Red and through different means, but to really kind of reach out to that active business owner or property manager or person that is actually on the ground in the business every day. It's not always, just the person on the property record card. So like kind of digging into that and finding our database, we developed a collaboration with the town clerk, used some outside databases, and created kind of a constant contact just to get some basic information out to the people that we had in our list. And that list can, it's still a work in progress, working on that.
Sure. And, as, businesses were forced to close and the CARES Act was passed, what did you see as sort of like, the biggest challenges that businesses faced at that time?
Well, I think, kind of observing the impacts of the closures, to help, stop the spread, there was a real imbalance to who was affected by it. Everyone, initially felt it, but you could see, the retail and restaurant, just given having such a presence in town, that they felt it the most. And retail in particular, especially with Burlington, their retail, depending a lot on the office and the employees that also come to town. When they start working from home and they're able to do that, adopting some of the more work at home practices, you could see, even with the, takeout, curbside, the demand was less and still is less. I think that's something we're going to have to take, a more systemic look at how this plays out over time.
And, just as far as like getting the aid, I know that initially, some of the businesses that would have qualified for it had a difficult time getting it. How did that sort of play out? Was the second round better?
The second round, it was better, but if you go to certain businesses, anecdotally I've heard, some people are still waiting for some of the funding to come through that they put forward. They told they would get some money and they didn't. So, there has not been a really comprehensive report town by town on how the funding's been distributed. So that's one thing we've been asking kind of higher level at the state level and the SBA to kind of give us that information so we can have some insight where things are. A lot of communities ended up doing some individual like survey work. We did not, choose to do that. It felt at the time, I know we worked with Rick Parker and thought maybe, there were a lot of demands on our businesses already, to go through and ask them, how things are going with the survey. We thought we'd hold off on that. But that's how some communities have found some of the information on who got what to date.
And that overall, do you think that most of Burlington businesses are sort of, we're able to weather the storm and we'll be coming back? I know there's a lot of people who have apprehension that their favorite restaurant might not, stay open, or, how overall do you think, things are kind of going in town?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with regard to that, I mean, from what we can tell, this is more anecdotal, Rich, but
Mhm.
the idea is, with a lot of the, fire, which is kind of finance, insurance, gosh, and I'm forgetting right now, the R and the E. I can't remember. Type companies. We are experiencing, for the folks who are portable in their jobs, I should say, those office spaces, they're only seeing about 10% occupied, and we're hearing people will not return to, occupancy in those buildings until maybe, February, the fall, or even the next, coming year in 2021. So, I mean, that's going to have a ripple effect on all the smaller, the services that we've talked about in terms of restaurants and retail. And I mean, I think that's kind of, people are wringing their hands a little bit here, how are we going to address that? Where does the demand come from? I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but.
Well, I understand that, there's a lot of unknowns out there. So, specific answers might be, hard to come by these days. The response of we're sort of waiting to see has been, kind of unanimous across the board. So that's fine. But you mentioned, that with so many people working from home, they don't necessarily live in Burlington. I know Burlington goes from, 25,000 or so residents to over 100,000 during the day when everything's up and running. So is that what you're talking about, having, fewer people in town that, are requiring all the amenities that, Burlington has to offer?
Yeah, the demand. I mean, I think locally we're about 11%, give or take, on unemployment within Burlington. Currently, nationwide, or at least in Massachusetts, unemployment's around 14%. So, that's one indicator people are looking at. The demand, when we're talking about, the occupancy, if, your office tenants are kind of down to 15% and most people are working from home, that's a significant reduction in what you're seeing in the foot traffic through the malls and through the restaurants. There's still hope and there's still demand. I think it's kind of how it'll kind of manifest geographically a little bit too. I mean, I think urban planners and people who are kind of looking at it regionally is how are we addressing that on the regional scale too.
Right. And now, recently there's been a big push in Burlington, town meeting passed some zoning bylaw changes to sort of encourage and attract more biotech. I know that they were part of the phase 1 of reopening labs. Any sense of how they fared, and, are they getting back to normal?
Right. I mean, I think with life science, they haven't missed a beat, really. They've been, moving forward, still looking for space. VC Capital's really invested a lot more. The trends in terms of investments in life science has been really strong. Medical devices, I know over in Bedford, they have a light manufacturing plant. They're looking for employees. And so there is a strong kind of demand, given partly the pandemic, because, everything from vaccine to, like I said, medical devices that are related. But in terms of manufacturing, they were allowed, some of them at least were able to stay open through the pandemic as well. So that is an industry that we still want to target for Burlington as an area to grow. And I think we want to, beyond just, zoning in a couple key parcels, look at how our infrastructure and how we're doing some other key incentives in town to move that forward. And I think, you mentioned town meeting. At town meeting, we did get approval for an economic development strategy. So what we want to do with that is not only kind of reaffirm our target industry as life science, but we want to explore things that we need to do to cultivate, a diverse economy. So we want to look at the 3D manufacturing cluster that we have here, the additive manufacturing. It's, we actually have a strong mini cluster growing here. Want to look at how we can develop that. So there's some long-term stuff that we kind of want to focus on, even though as we're kind of dealing with a lot of short-term recovery tasks, but there's a long-term planning that we want to be working on as well.
Excellent. It sounds, I mean, as in another segment of this show, I talked to planning director Kristin Kassner, and she said, some towns have pretty much just shut down completely. It sounds like that was not the case in Burlington. Things kept going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, it seems it's a little odd because obviously to stop this spread, they closed the doors to the public to limit the spread, of the virus. But in terms of internal and day-to-day, staff was here and they were working, the permits were going out, virtual meetings, like Kristin probably mentioned, were taking place. So there was a lot more advancement than you would see maybe in some of the other communities at the time. So yeah, no, I've been, proud to work here in Burlington to see that kind of continue on.
Excellent. Now I know one of your, roles or, functions is that you sort of help business application when, a business wants to come to town, sort of help them maneuver through the process. So you kind of are right on the front lines of who's looking to come to town. Have you noticed a decrease in new applications, or are people still sort of, looking to, do business in Burlington with a, an eye towards like the long term?
Right. Yeah, there's definitely more of a pause going on right now. There's, I think the uncertainty has kind of, slowed down the momentum that people had. We've heard it through some of the contractors who work on tenant improvements and the leasing side of things. We're trying to track a few of the life science things that there's still, we've heard activity in the region. But in terms of town and kind of the majority of that momentum has kind of slowed down.
Okay. And I know, as we talked before, probably in about a month, we're going to probably reconnect and sort of have a better sense of sort of how the reopening is working. But, as things are slowly opening, I mean, how do you see it going, and what sort of are the current challenges that businesses are facing right now as we're sitting here in, late June?
Well, I think when I look at this, I feel like the smaller, more independent businesses is what I've kind of looked to for a barometer, if you will, of how things are going. And I noted that those who, were more tech savvy, had built up maybe a strong database, were able to pivot and really survive through the pandemic, whether it was, a restaurant that was able to, use their app and get pickup to go or deliveries moving, or, fitness that was able to kind of transfer and do a lot online. But those who weren't able to do that, have struggled or had trouble reaching out to their regular customers. That was something I've noticed. On the large scale for the corporate, kind of more white collar type jobs, they've been able to go, move to telework and, work from home options. And maybe because there hasn't been too many opportunities to, really kind of vacation or anything, the general sentiment has been that productivity has also surprisingly been up, because I know a lot of people think, the work from home option will not kind of result in the same level of productivity. But I've actually heard that it's been pretty successful. So that's why I think you're seeing, also with the pandemic still kind of things unknown, you're seeing a hesitancy to have everyone just come back into the office because they're able to get by with certain work, at home.
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing all of our things like this, keeping it remote. I mean, I'm looking forward to having people back in the studio, but as for right now, this seems to be working. So yeah, all right. So it seems like, just to encapsulate, things have been still going on in Burlington, businesses getting done. There are some that have been struggling, but hopefully as things open up that, they'll be able to recover and get back to some kind of new normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I think, I don't know if Kristin mentioned this in your previous, conversations, but I think there's some lessons also learned from, the recession in 2008, that even when there is, kind of a downturn, it gives us an opportunity to do some advanced planning to, position us in a stronger, just better position us, I should say, going forward when things do start to pick up. And that's why I have been kind of excited about our economic development strategy plan, and at the same time, looking at the federal government, because they'll be looking, likely, it hasn't been approved yet, but for infrastructure dollars, related to kind of similar to the CARES Act. And we want to be poised to, take advantage of those kind of funds as well. I know we've been able to do that. We've applied for a workforce development grant. We've applied for some shared space parking and public space grants that were also through the CARES Act. So going forward, I think that's, something that we don't want to lose sight of, as much as there's, small tasks to be done, everything from like approving outdoor seating to, signage, requests on the short term to help people move things along, but in the long term for the overall benefit of the community and its economic health.
Yeah, so able to take advantage of the moment to sort of look for the future. I think that all sounds great. I think we're just about at our time, so I would like to thank you for taking some time today. I know you can see you're back in the office, so that's good. So thank you very much, and I will hopefully talk to you again soon as things sort of continue to reopen and kind of move forward.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for having me.
And now for a look at how businesses, especially locally owned small businesses, handled the pandemic, we go to my interview with Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker. Let's take a look.
I'm now joined by Rick Parker, President of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. Rick, thanks for taking some time during all of this. I know you must be pretty busy with everything going on.
I appreciate it, Rich. Glad to be here.
So we just wanted to kind of take a look back since the beginning of this whole situation and kind of go through how the business community was impacted and how it worked to weather the storm. What are some of the biggest things that you saw, in Burlington?
Well, I think Burlington is a little unique in that it's a technology and restaurant and hospitality area, but the general feeling from business was the same throughout the state and throughout the country. The instantaneous shutdown of business and the cutting off of revenue affected businesses on all levels, and more so the small businesses. The relief package that was issued, there were problems rolling it out initially, and we spent a great deal of time in the first few weeks helping businesses migrate their way through the CARES package and getting them money to just be able to exist, in a week-to-week basis.
Yeah. What were some of the big issues? I know that there was, difficulty with the Paycheck Protection Program, which was part of the CARES Act, if I'm not mistaken, and, just trying to get those funds to the people who really needed it. I know some larger businesses were sort of, slammed online and in the press for, getting some of the money when they already were probably, seen by many as, too big to be the intended recipients under the spirit of the law.
Yeah, there certainly were a few instances there. Unfortunate that it delayed in getting some money to the people who really needed it. But what you had, Rich, was in the history of the country, it was some of our best times ever, followed by an instantaneous stopping of the economy. So the federal government, state government, and even local businesses had difficulty adjusting immediately. So as the CARES relief packages came out and were funded, the SBA really didn't have the bandwidth to implement the system, and the rules were changing, day to day. So as SBA lenders got in line to be able to to get the money to the individual businesses, the procedures and protocols and the systems weren't in place while the small businesses clamored for the money. So it was just a case of, we turned the fire hose on, and it was tough to control in the beginning. But after a few weeks, things did settle down, and the money started making it to the small businesses that really needed it the most.
And have you seen a lot of cases in Burlington where, some of the businesses that, the small businesses like we're talking about are, were able to have success with that program?
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a lifesaver. There were those that were, there aren't a great deal of small businesses that have a lot of reserves. And if you look at historically leading up to this, we were in very good times, and competition was at the height. I think profits for some of the small businesses, particularly those in hospitality and the restaurant industry, the margins were very small. So the standalone restaurants really needed that injection of money immediately. And the governing rules behind how it would be turned from a loan to a grant depended on those businesses being able to spend it paying their employees during a time when they weren't allowed to be open. So there were a number of obstacles that had to be worked out as it went along. And eventually it did meet the need of getting us past those few first weeks and into the reopening phase, which presented a whole other set of problems, challenges.
Right. And, obviously they were not allowed to have any in-house dining, but takeout and delivery were, available. What sort of have you been hearing as far as how successful that was? Were people actually taking advantage of it? Were businesses able to, kind of get any relief from offering those services?
Well, Rich, it was a very important time. If you remember, when everything shut down, the only things that were allowed to be open really were hospitals and grocery stores, shopping stores. So with everyone trying to experience and comply with social distancing, the takeout from the restaurants was critical during those first few weeks in order to give people another resource without having to get in lines at the supermarkets. It certainly wasn't a profitable thing for the restaurants, but it was a sense of normalcy for the managers and some of the chefs that stayed on just to keep the shop open. But as far as from a financial perspective, it certainly wasn't even close to being a break even for them, but it was some sense of normalcy and a feeling like we won't have to completely restart when the reopening process came up. But I think it was critical for the community as well to get some sense of normalcy, being able to, if you remember, we were all hunkered down and no one was going out anywhere. To have takeout food was that little piece of normalcy for all of us that helped. And I thank the restaurants for really stepping up and giving us an alternative at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you don't realize how much you crave pizza until you go like 4 weeks without it. And have you been hearing anything? I know a lot of these restaurants, they don't own the property that they're on. They rent. Were there any arrangements that you've heard of like landlords sort of allowing businesses to have a forbearance or a forgiveness or push things off? Anything kind of along those lines as far as like just trying to keep businesses viable during all this?
Well, I can say, Rich, that the businesses in this area, we all realize how much we depend on each other. So the relationships between the landlords and the tenants have been phenomenal. Certainly, I'm not privy to the discussions that were made there, but I can't say everyone did understand that this was a period that we had to go beyond what we've done in the past and allow some room for maneuvering and maybe even restructuring some leases. So while I'm not privy to the details of it, I do know that things have gone fairly well for most of the businesses. And again, it's critical. They realize that what we see when this is all over, it will take a while to get back to where we were. And it's going to take a little bit of give and take on everyone's side to get there.
Now, we've talked a lot about the restaurants. Switch a little bit now. Just, like you said, we also tech and office space, a lot of that going on in town. As far as the offices go, I mean, is it just sort of come to the realization that, when in need, people can just work from home, work remotely? I think a lot of people made that transition. And
yeah, if you remember, Rich, when we were first starting this off, if somebody said Zoom meeting, you had no idea what they were talking about. I think it's taken on its own title now. We're fortunate in this area that we are very tech heavy, and a lot of people who in the beginning may not have enjoyed having to work from home and make their bedrooms an office. But I think with the addition of the lack of childcare and schools being open, it became a necessity. And in those first few weeks, while there were some struggles, I think people started to adjust to not getting in their car and making that trek, and maybe only dressing appropriately from the waist up during these meetings, and maybe they had their slippers still on. But it was less of an impact on our area than it is in some other areas that depended on strictly on manufacturing and people being in the facility.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we all saved a lot of gas during all this.
Sure did.
So before we wrap up, it was something that you and I talked about a little while ago, sort of an anecdote about, how adjustments were made, and something I don't think a lot of people know about chambers of commerce. You had a procedure, I think it was, somebody needed to ship something overseas, and you had to sort of work a way of social distancing, but also doing a process where you have to kind of verify that what's in there is in there. Sort of relate. Yeah. I for one didn't even know that that's something that you guys had to do. So
yeah, what you're referring to is on all export documentation, there has to be a local chamber of commerce that certifies the documentation of the company that's manufacturing. So during those first few weeks, when all of the domestic trade shut down, there was still the opportunity to keep some revenue coming in with exporting. We had a large number of people that required it, and that was something that was not allowed to be done electronically at the time. So we had people coming to the office, and yeah, we were passing things through mail slots, sanitizing things as they came in and went out. But we were actually able to play a critical part in making sure that things can continue to be shipped and exported, bringing some revenue to companies that were in desperate need of it.
Yeah, so from what I can tell, the Chamber of Commerce was definitely not on vacation during any of this.
I can assure you that, Rich. It certainly was some of the hardest times dealing with businesses that were on the brink, but also it was very gratifying to be able to try to get the information and weed through the government regulations as they came down. If you recall, when we had the reopening process, it all depended on the health data numbers continuing to get to that next step. And as the governor would outline these steps, businesses had to predict, okay, this is what we're going to do on a certain date, but it was all contingent on health data. So we had to be prepared, but also be ready for starts and stops if in fact that was going to be the case.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. Well, thank you for all you've been doing and for coming on today and taking some time to kind of go over, give people sort of the big picture of what was happening, and as we sort of move forward into the next stage, we'll kind of keep monitoring what's coming up. So
Rich, I appreciate it.
And now for an insider's look in how Burlington dealt with the COVID-19 situation, we go to Scott Weiss of the Gutierrez Company, one of the large developers in town, to find out how businesses dealt with the pandemic. Let's check it out.
I'm now joined by Scott Weiss of the Gutierrez Company. Scott, hope everything is going well for you and you're staying healthy and safe during this time of coronavirus.
Yes, thanks for having me, Rich. Happy to be here virtually, and other than the extended facial growth that I've been sporting, myself, my family, all doing well and getting through these very unusual, difficult times.
So I wanted to ask, because I know you guys have a lot of developments in town and, a lot of tenants. What have you been seeing, when the shutdown started, what was sort of some of the biggest things that you noticed happening?
Well, it's very interesting. Obviously, right at the beginning, there was a lot of uncertainty, and people weren't really sure what to do, how to react. But most everyone, most people, most tenants, most employees, everybody was pretty quick with the governor's orders to work from home, stay at home. We have a lot of professional office building type space, so those cleared out and emptied out pretty quickly. And really, even though we're in this 25% return to work capacity, it's been pretty light in most facilities. We've had to maintain our facility staff to keep buildings open and safe and operating as at a minimum level, to allow for any essential workers that needed to be in certain spaces. But for the most part, at the very beginning, everybody just disappeared. It was a little eerie.
Yeah, our studios in the school, and it was the same thing. Just one day everyone was there, the next day nobody was.
Yeah.
So with some tenants, probably having a big disruption to their businesses, did you, as a company, work out sort of like rental issues with them, like understanding that they wouldn't have as much income coming in? Was that part of it?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting experience. Most all of our tenants and groups have continued to be able to pay rent and continue working forward. We've seen very limited requests to either restructure, delay, or extend, to have some forbearance now and extend the lease period. It's been very limited, actually. And again, it's a little bit of the world we're in, where most of our space is of the professional office type environment, where people and tenants have been able to do that in the retail world and the certainly restaurants and places like that. It's been definitely a little bit more difficult and more challenging for them to maintain their business and income stream.
Yeah, because you've got a lot more, like you said, businesses, high end, and places like Millipore, Sigma, which I'm guessing they had some people working on because they are a medical facility. Yeah,
so they have a pretty significant lab presence in the building up on the summit. But most of they, like most everyone, transitioned very quickly to a work from home environment, and except for their essential personnel and essential operations, whether they had lab research efforts underway or some other components that needed to be maintained, overseen, and managed, those people would continue to go in. But again, for the most part, they too, like everyone else, started a work from home type operation.
And I know everybody's been sort of scattered and working remotely, but have you had a sort of a sense of how the Burlington business community as a whole been kind of working through this, and sort of who's been helpful, who's been trying to out there on the front lines trying to make sure that people stay connected and take advantage of whatever programs and assistance that is offered?
Yeah, so it's been a very interesting and difficult situation for some groups. Obviously, a smaller operations, more retail based, more food based, restaurant based, has been very, very challenging, whereas a lot of the professional office environments have been able to continue, although I think there will be lingering impacts from this in terms of demand for office space going into the future. The Burlington Chamber has done an outstanding job. Rick Parker and the team has really worked very hard to identify needs of businesses in the community, especially the small businesses, and try to work with them to help facilitate their efforts and to help them maintain their operations where they could. I do think that there's going to be, as we move forward, there's been an adjustment. A lot of this takeout food, obviously, as we've seen, a lot of curbside pickup for both food as well as retail. I think those components are likely to continue to be desired in the community, in the marketplace as we move forward, and it's going to change how we operate and how we set up facilities going forward. I think a lot more, takeout and curbside pickup, and I think pickup drop off, curbside areas being dedicated a lot more, so that we have room for vehicles to perhaps queue and to do things like that. We are seeing now some requests to do some outdoor areas, especially as we now are in spring and summer timeframe, to take up some of that unused parking lot space because people are working remotely, and to either put in picnic tables, to outside work areas, to even restaurants wanting to do some outdoor seating and the like. And so I think the town has been very responsive to date. I think there's going to be some more challenges going forward, but the town's been very responsive, and the fact that they've been able to stay open and continue operating virtually or in person as need be for critical services. But a lot of the meetings, the Board of Selectmen and Planning Board and others have continued, certainly Board of Health, for everything they've been doing, have been able to continue to meet and continue to process applications and to keep the business world moving forward, which is, has been really challenging during this time. And we've seen other communities completely shut down and not respond. So the chamber and the town have been very effective in the community.
Excellent. That's good to hear. And yeah, I mean, they've been meeting virtually, and, things have been a little bit sort of slower, I think, to get processed, but things have been moving forward. So that's good. And last thing, just, as we sort of enter this reopening phase, how you see things sort of getting back to, if not back to normal, into a new normal?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It's really up in the air how long this is going to take before we have this new normal in place, whatever that may be, and whether we're all sort of settled in. As I said, I think as we transition, it's going to be a long time before office space, I think, really starts to fill up. And what even is a full office at this point? I think this pandemic has really accelerated certain trends that were softly moving forward. There was certainly a work from home mentality. There was a densification of office space, which I think is going to be either delayed, if not killed, for some time, in terms of crowding people into an office area. So the use of office space over time is probably going to change for certainly as we move forward into the next year, 2 years, and you start thinking 5 and 10 years down. We are working on an office project right now that is under construction, not in Burlington at the moment, but the user is really thinking about how they're going to restructure some of the space, and they're not looking at major changes, but maybe the idea of the close in for seating for employees without some sort of vertical separation, kind of like those sneeze guards you see in the grocery stores now, and higher wall cubicles and things like that, where people have more dedicated personal space. I think that is certainly here to stay for a little bit of time. And then, again, as we think about the longer term, I think I, for one, don't want to, jump back into a store anytime soon if I don't need to. Certainly grocery stores and the like, but the idea that you can maybe order online and there's personnel in a store in a protected environment that can, assemble the goods and you can pick them up curbside or have them delivered. I think those types of changes, to the retail world, again, some of them were in process with Amazon and e-commerce, and I think it's just going to be highly accelerated, and we have to rethink the space and the service to get in and out of those facilities. And then having said that, I think the last thing is, places where we congregate, such as a restaurant or whether it be sporting venues or town meeting or the like, any place where you congregate is going to be challenging for some time and require probably larger spaces than you would have otherwise expected. The small, intimate, crowded little restaurant is going to be very, very difficult at this point. And the idea of supporting more use of the outdoor space for all of these facilities, whether it be restaurants or anything else, I think will be beneficial to helping keep some of these businesses alive and continuing to operate.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of adjustment.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for taking some time this morning and joining me here on In Depth, and hope as things move forward, we were able to see more things opening and people are able to do it in a nice and safe way.
Yeah, I look forward to it, and hopefully we can have the opportunity to meet in person again in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you very much.
So there you have it, an in-depth look at how Burlington worked together to stay strong through the pandemic and keep as many businesses open as possible. I'd like to thank my guests, Planning Director Kristin Kassner, Economic Development Director Melisa Tintocalis, Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce President Rick Parker, and Scott Weiss of the Gutierrez Company. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next month with another edition of BNEWS In Depth, so stay tuned.